is Idzihar Bailey. I'm a U.S. citizen, a registered voter, and an American Muslim. I'm an activist and a lobbyist, and I live on Capitol Hill in Seattle, Washington. Now, Capitol Hill can easily be considered the most liberal part of Seattle, and as a Muslim living there the past 4 years, I've definitely had a lot of interesting interactions with people. So let me tell you about a little something called liberal Islamophobia. It's far different than the more traditional form, yet I see it as more troubling. The more traditional breed is a lot easier to pick up. When people say things like, "Go back to where you came from," or "I can't pronounce a name like that." I can give you the first example in my life where I experienced this more traditional form. About 4 years ago, a month after converting to Islam, it didn't take long for people from my hometown to find out. And through Facebook, a man I went to high school with decided to give me his input. He said, "I'm not surprised you would end up an ISIS bride." Now, I'm not married, but I have to say, it kind of takes guts to say something like that to someone. And in a weird way, I kind of respect that he had the courage to do so. Because then there's liberal Islamophobia, and while it often stems from the same ignorance and misinformation, it's covered with this facade of the person wanting to appear like a good ally, or ultra-progressive, or a savior for Muslims, often speaking for them as well. It's like when people say, "Don't worry, I know that Saudi Arabia doesn't represent you," as some sort of positive statement of understanding. When in reality, it's not about whether or not a place or thing represents me. The issue here is that not only do you know nothing about what Saudi Arabia is like, you know nothing about me, my life, Islam, or how I choose to practice Islam. So let me give you some examples where I've come across this. The most recent thing I can think of is when a local newspaper that also puts on events decided to put on an inclusive and educational talk with Muslims on Capitol Hill. However, upon contacting Muslims to attend, we find out it's being held in a bar. And it's like, how can you be advocating for inclusiveness and education when you don't even bother to learn the very basics about the people you're trying to appeal to? Even if this was a talk with Christians, single mothers, farmers, why would a bar seem like an appropriate place? But I mean, I guess it's the thought that counts, right? Now, all over Capitol Hill, you see these signs. They say, "Stop profiling Muslims, refugees welcome." My favorite example is where both of these are placed in front of a bar on Pike, a place most practicing Muslims wouldn't enter. My point is, people set these signs in front of their doors not for Muslims, but to make themselves feel good while doing very little to accommodate those Muslims or refugees. Now this carries on into some of my favorite coffee shops that I spend a lot of my time in, many of which donned these signs after last year's election. Now, the first 3 years after my conversion, I was on and off with hijab, and I think that helped me experience the way people treat Muslims to an even greater extent. I mean, one day I'd walk in and be charged full price. The next day I'd come in hijab. The barista doesn't recognize me, and she says, "What a beautiful scarf," and gives me my coffee for free. And I'm a big girl. I don't need that kind of pity. In fact, it's not uncommon for people to come up to me when I'm working on stuff and say in an almost offensively slow manner, "You belong here." Yeah, you know what? I do belong here because I'm a white American from a military family using my freedom to worship God the way that I please. Or did you think otherwise? That being said, sometimes people are offended for Muslims at my expense. By this I mean, as soon as someone finds out that I'm white, they either try to get out of the conversation they're having with me because, I'm no longer a good candidate for their token Muslim friend, or they accuse me of something. Now, this usually comes because they assume that I'm Arab to begin with, and they say something like, Arabic is a beautiful language, to which I respond with, yeah, it sure is. Now this always leads into, well, where are you from? Because that's their business. Saying from here never works, and I try to get away with saying, oh, I'm from a small town in the middle of the woods in Mason County. No, they want to know where my family came from. Now, this goes different depending on their knowledge of geography. So I tell people, okay, I'm from Eastern Europe. The majority of my family comes from Serbia and Romania. Now, some people will say, oh, that makes sense. No, it doesn't. It just sounds far away enough for you. And some people will be rightfully very confused, like, oh, Serbia, there's some history there. You see, I try to put off revealing that I'm a convert for as long as possible, because eventually you stop being a convert and you're just, well, a Muslim. And converts are super common in Islam. I mean, as of last year, 1/4 of the entire US Muslim population now consists of converts to the religion. And it's the fastest growing and the most diverse. Yet, I offend people. Not Muslims, just other white people. You know, to them, I suppose, Bosnia, Chechnya, Kosovo, white Muslim European countries, those don't exist. Or the fact that less than 20% of the Muslim population in the world are Arab, or that there's more Muslims in Indonesia altogether. Or that when they met me, they assumed I was Arab to begin with, and that's not my fault. Oh no. Too many times I've been accused of appropriating Arabic culture. Because I do this for fun. It makes them feel good, like they're doing something great for the real Muslims. For this very reason, I was once kicked out of a Dungeons and Dragons group that I was asked to join because I had some mutual friends who knew I played tabletop games. However, at the time, I didn't go by my Muslim name on Facebook. And when I showed up like this, they were so upset with me. In fact, they started talking about Arab women, specifically women from Gulf countries, women who I spend a lot of time with. And when I didn't tell them anything that fit the narrative of, oh, poor them, they're oppressed, I was told I don't understand the struggles of those women, which is true, I don't, that I'm appropriating their culture by the way that I'm dressed, and that I was doing brown face. All I said was that my Arab friends are all spoiled rich girls who've never had to work a day in their life, which was just the reality. Yet, because I didn't tell them what they wanted to hear, and because along with that, well, I was white, I was kicked out of the D&D group with some very harsh words and accusations. I mean, brown face. They specifically said it's obvious that I do my makeup to make myself appear more Arab. Yet I clearly remember the foundation color I had on that day was bone and was the lightest in the shade range. Oh. The worst part about all of this is that these were really great people, right? These were people who work in the mayor's office, who volunteer time to help the helpless, who go to rallies that I now help organize, and yet they truly thought I was this terrible person, and they truly thought they were helping Muslims by outing me. Now, my last example is from a recent talk I did with my friend Pastor Terry Kylo. I occasionally help with an organization called Neighbors in Faith, where we go to different congregations and we speak to the churchgoers about being neighbors in faith, and we answer questions. Now, upon arriving to a more liberal congregation up north in Friday Harbor, I was immediately shown to the kitchen, where there is an assortment of pita bread, dates, baklava. They said with excitement, "We got this for you." I didn't know how to break the news to them. They were being so nice. Imagine if you, as an American, were invited to speak at a conference in Burkina Faso. When you arrive, you're shown to a kitchen where there's an assortment of hamburgers and hot dogs. Everyone says with excitement, "This is for you," except in this scenario, you're Chinese American. This is how I felt. Now, there have been other events like this one, where when we go to places in more right-leaning Trump voting areas, people are a lot less politically correct. And they're very quick to ask questions, which is what we want, which is the reason that we're there. But when we have these events closer to the city, it's so hard to get people talking, to the point that we've contemplated having a plant in the audience because they don't want to look like a bad ally. They don't want to look bad. And swinging back to the beginning, I'd much prefer that man calling me an ISIS bride, because at least he's telling me what he really thinks. At least he has conviction in what he says, and he's not afraid to say it. I have way more respect for that. Now, I don't doubt the sincerity of these people. Like, I'm sure they truly do care. But they certainly don't care enough to learn anything. And when they do, it seems to be geared again towards making themselves feel good, not the actual outcome or treatment of those Muslims. And half the time, they don't even want to talk about what my religious beliefs actually are. I feel like Republicans are so often thrown under the bus as being inherently Islamophobic, and I don't think that's the case, because as a religious person, I have way more in common with my conservative friends than with my liberal friends. And extremes on one side are always going to lead to extremes on the other. You can't ignore the flaws and the ignorance within your own parties. Like, Islamophobia just simply isn't a partisan issue. Very few things in this world are partisan issues. Now, I've been complaining a lot. And you might be asking, well, what can I do? And the answer is extremely simple. In fact, it's the answer to most problems in the world, and that's education, right? Like, pick up a book, go to a mosque. Like, any day of the week, there'll be people there to welcome you and answer your questions, people who know what they're talking about. It's a pure, simple case of educating yourself and being willing to listen. No motives, no hero complex. Just get to know a Muslim and learn something new. Thank you.